Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam, and I'm about to start the show. And, listen, it wouldn't be the start of the show if I didn't just do one little short commercial about my best-selling book, Sheep Know More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It'll show you how attackers look at you. There's some stories in there as well about my time in the FBI and gives you some insight in how SEALs think in the Navy. But overall, the book is techniques, or a technique, the attack and defend technique, that will show you how to look at yourself like an attacker and then turn around and use that information to build better defenses, better overall awareness, and plans of action when you just can't change something, but you still have to be there. Now, several of my buddies in the protective services have reached out to me and said that they are now using the workbooks to do all of their threat assessment and site surveys before they protect somebody. That's a compliment, but it also shows you the reality of what I've done is given you the tools that professionals use without all the industry lingo and in an interesting way. I literally wrote the book as though I was writing it for my mom, so I took out all the operator language so that she could understand it, and she found it useful. She also found it interesting. Now, she is my mom, but let me just tell you, she's right. And for the children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's a book of pictures with the whole team there. You got Jesse and Rico and Bonnie Sue and Meow Meow. Those are the characters. And each picture has about 5 lessons of awareness and communication and safety for children, basically about 2 to 8 years old. And the parent goes to teamlittlebigs.com and gets the lesson plan. So you give the child the book, and then you point out the lessons repeatedly for them. It's also great for learning disabled children. I've actually had some parents review the book who have autistic children. They said it was great and an effective way to repeat the lessons so that they understand them. Sheep Know More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 workbooks, so you can apply it. And The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Listen, the whole thing, you know what it does? It makes your homeland safer. Go get them wherever books are sold. And let's start the show.
The truth has arrived.
My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. And happy Monday. Welcome back to the show. And, this isn't going to be a long show. I always say that ends up being like an hour long, but really this isn't going to be a very long show because what I really want to cover with you is I want to show you how media spin actually works and how people who have an ulterior motive or a special interest or whatever, that what they do, and publicists are really good at this. A lot of the time it's not the actual person who's doing the speaking and things like that. It's the publicist that understands how this works. And I'll tell you a little bit about it and how I know that it works. And then I'm going to show you some examples of that and how that's occurring right now. Now, first off, before I go into great detail about this, let me just clarify one thing for all the people who know who I am and follow what I have to say and believe in the truth that I bring. Okay, it's based on years of experience, not only from the military, but also what I majored in college in political science and psychology. I was a SEAL. I was in the FBI. I did all these different things. And what it did for me was give me an overall understanding of how things work, how people work when they're stressed, and how they function as a team when they really do function as a team, and how often, and most often, they function as a gaggle. I learned what people are like when they're stressed versus when they're happy, and how both can bring out the best and the worst in people. I see it all the time. You see it all the time. I learned from all these different things and the experience of growing up extremely poor, the only boy amongst all girls and women, and what I learned about myself from being alone and having to deal with things. My father died at a very young age, being raised by an incredible mom who always strove to keep me fed and clothed and have fun. That was a big thing about growing up in Arkansas with my mom, is that we always were doing things that were fun. It didn't cost a whole lot. We didn't have a lot of money, but going to the lake, going to the river, floating, a lot of it involved water, which is probably why I became a SEAL. But all these different things have led me to understand, or at least to have a propensity to understand, to slow down, stop, and look at the big picture. When you add into that the investigative career fields that I've been in and the training that I've been through in the FBI and in other law enforcement agencies about investigating, I've just seen things, and I see things now in a different way than most people do. But here's the difference between me and a lot of other people, is that it's not ego driven. When I look at things, I look at it from the perspective of what's really going on here. Not what can I show people that I know. How can I show people that I know more than they do? That's never in my mind. That's never my motivation. It's always when I'm led to something, especially when I'm called to something by God, or I'm put into a situation where I have, something's occurred, and I know for a fact from the totality of the evidence, or I know for a fact because I've actually done it, and I feel propelled to call somebody out or explain it to people so that they understand and they can call people out. This has not been by mistake. Okay, everybody, and you have to understand this about yourself. You have a purpose. There is a meaning behind why things occur to you. Now, I know this is totally, people are going to think, oh my gosh, this is like, I have two of these stories. I think I've told one of them on here before, but something happened the other day that is, it's really, really tiny, but it's very remarkable as far as my mind goes, and how things occur in your life and you think, why is this occurring? Why is this so painful? And then when you sit back and you look at reality, things it actually shows you that there was a reason for it. Now, I haven't told anybody about this, no one. And so the other day it snowed like crazy out here in New York. And I was going to turn on my generator in my RV, because you want to run that every now and then. I've been having problems with my starter. I got to get it looked at. But so I was underneath. I had my headsets in. I actually was talking to my mom, and I have the Apple AirPods, I think they're called, and those things barely sit in your ear. Listen, Apple. I don't know if anybody listens from Apple, but you got to come up with a better design for these things to stay in your ear. It's ridiculous. Anyway, they barely fit in my ear, and they just fall out if you lean over a little bit. And so I'm underneath. I forgot I had them on after I hung up the phone, and so I kind of crawled underneath the RV, and because that's where the generator is, and so there's snow on the ground and everything. I cleared some of the snow out of the way. I get down there and hit the automatic start button. It came on for a second, then it went back off, so it almost came on again, and then I think it's the starter just starts tapping. So I sat there for a few minutes trying to see if I could kick that back, if it would just kick in. It never did. And I get up, and I could feel something in my left ear, because I forgot I had my headsets in. And then I reached up and grabbed it, and then I didn't feel it in the right ear. So I feel it in the right ear, and there's nothing there. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. These things are as white as snow. And so I didn't touch anything. I mean, this is one of the things I learned throughout the years, all the things I've done, is if you drop something, set a perimeter, and then just go back and forth. You can either go around in a circle where you start in the middle and you kind of go around and the circle gets bigger and bigger, or you do it in grids until you find what it is you're looking for. So there was only like a 10-foot area where I'd been, and I had gone inside the RV for a few minutes. So I started there. I went in the RV and looked around. It wasn't there. Remember, I'm just looking for one headset. I went to the side of the RV. I was looking all through the snow there, and I didn't disturb anything. I wanted to make sure that as I did this grid, that if it had fallen in the snow, that I wasn't going to disturb it, so that maybe I could see where it had gone in the snow and then pull it up, right? So anyway, that's my theory of how or my technique in how I find things. So I didn't see anything. I go back to the back. I'm looking down, trying not to disturb the snow where had been laying. I knew it had to be somewhere right there. So I get back down in the position that I was underneath the RV. I even pushed the button a couple times to see if if I could tell where it might have fallen. I get back up and I'm thinking maybe it's in my hoodie because that hoodie. So I take my hoodie off, and now I've got a jacket. I've got a shirt on. I took my jacket and then my hoodie off. Couldn't find it anywhere. It wasn't in there. So then what I did was I came up and I took the other earpiece and I put it in my hand and squeezed it real tight. So because that would activate the Bluetooth, and then I turned the music on and I put my hand up to my ear and I could hear the song playing in my hand. Then I put my hand in my pocket and I could hear something. I knew that it was probably, I could hear it, but I wasn't sure if it was coming from my hand. So I'd put my hand in different places, still nothing. I couldn't tell where the thing was. And this is where the story gets interesting. I laid back down one more time under the RV. And I'm laying there thinking to myself, okay, it's got to be probably right around here somewhere. And these things cost, they're ridiculously expensive. And I got these for a Christmas gift, and they're $200. So I said, I don't normally pray about stuff like this, but Lord, if you could help me find these, they're expensive. It would be a shame to lose something that somebody spent so much money on. And I'm not going to go out of my way to pray about this, but I would appreciate if you could help me find these. As ridiculous as that sounds, I'm willing to put in the time and stay out here and find them. I said, all right, that was the most crappy prayer I've ever said, but I mean it heartfelt and sincerely. I believe in God that much that I can ask him that. And if it's his will that I find him, then I'll find him. And I said, okay, that's it. If it's your will, I'll find him. If not, then we'll wait for the snow to thaw out and then we'll find him. So I get up. I did the whole thing again. I'm now like 30 minutes into this search. No headsets. I looked and laid down one more time. I get back up, kind of tracing as I get up where they might have flown out of my ear. Nothing at all. I could not find these things anywhere. And I'm just chalking it up to the fact that it's white snow on the ground and these things are white, and I'm probably never going to see them until it thaws and then they'll be ruined. So I started to go back inside and I looked down, and my RV is plugged in to the house. The way it keeps the batteries charged, and I actually keep the heat on just a little bit. I don't know if it does anything, but I keep the heat on just a little bit so everything doesn't freeze inside, even though I've got the whole system purged and with the antifreeze in it. So probably a lot of details you don't need to know. However, as I'm walking by the trailer, so I have a trailer that I pull behind the RV, I look down, and I knew this from when I went inside. Okay, when I went inside to look for the headset in there, the heat wasn't on, and I was like, what's going on? And I looked up there, and there was an error code on the little display. Man, this story's getting really long. I had to take a drink of water. It's getting so long. But it's a good story, so stay with me. So there's this error code. I think it was because something wasn't plugged in. So anyway, I came back out, and this is part of the story I left out. I checked the where the plug-in went into the RV. It was secured. I unscrewed it, took it out, put it back in. I went and looked at the house because I could see that the lights were on where the plug-ins were because they're see-through. So there's like 3 different sets of cords to get it long enough to go to the extension cords to get it to go to the house to plug in. And I could see there's a little orange light on each plug-in. If you've ever been to Walmart and you see these cords, that's what it is. They're clear and they have an orange light on the inside. So when they're plugged in, there's electricity going to it. It's orange. Okay. So it was plugged in the house. I could see orange on both of those. And I could not figure out, again, why. Now I'm engulfed in a different mystery. Why is this thing not charging my RV? And when I picked up the cord, it was right there, and it was attached to the final extension cord. Actually, it's the first extension cord that comes out of the RV, and then subsequently daisy chains to the other 2. I realized that there's actually a blue light on the one that goes into the RV, where it plugs in to the first extension. And although the extension was orange because it was getting power from the house, it wasn't connected to the one that goes into the RV properly. So I looked at it and I tried to get it, and it just falls out again. So I realized that the prongs that come off of the male end weren't wide enough. They'd been squished in for some reason, and so they weren't grasping. So I took my finger and I pressed hard as I could. I got to press out just enough where I could plug it in, and it was nice and secure. Okay, and I'm thinking, well, at least I got that. I'm pretty sure now, because I could see that the blue light was on, the orange light was on. So now I know that there's electricity going to the RV. I went back in the RV. I checked it again. There was no error code. I'm like, okay, great. At least I got that. At least I got that fixed. I come walking back out, and about a foot away from where I'd been laying on the ground, and I had checked at least 30 times, was my headset. My little AirPod was sitting right there. I could see it as plain as day. It's not like I had to get down on the ground. It's not like I had to, lay down in the snow again. It was simply right there. And I thought to myself, wow, this really hits home, Now, whether or not God did this, whether or not, the God that created all the universe decided that he would hide my AirPod for a period of time so that I could see that the RV was not plugged in, so I could see that, that something was going wrong when I went in to find it, and I saw the error code, and I came back out and was searching again, remembered there was an error code, looked down, couldn't figure out why it wasn't going in, and then realized it was the blue light, and then plugs weren't working, and I fixed those. Whether the God that created all universe hid that AirPod so that I would go through that, I don't know. But the lesson I learned from that, and I hope maybe you gleaned out of this, I don't know, because I rambled on for literally 15 minutes in the story, is that sometimes when you pray and you feel like it doesn't get answered, I know Garth Brooks sang a song a while, something about unanswered prayers. But this wasn't an unanswered prayer. This was an answered prayer. It just didn't happen in the time that I allotted for it. I said, I'm thinking, can I roll over after I say this prayer and that little earpiece will be there, that $200 earpiece. It wasn't there. It wasn't there in the time that I wanted it to be. But as not a coincidence, as a result of the search for the earpiece, I discovered that the RV was not plugged in, and then subsequently discovered why it wasn't plugged in or why that error code was happening, and I fixed it. And then turned around, and there's the AirPod. And the lesson I learned is that when you pray with patience, and those of you that know me know that I'm not the most patient person in the world. But when you pray, you should pray with faith and with patience, and faith that God's will be done, and hope that it's done. And all of that is based on the fact that you love God, you love him for the sacrifice that he did for you through his son Jesus, and for giving you the opportunity to go through life, good and bad. So there it was. In a second, that just hit me that sometimes, listen, God loves the fact that you pray to him. I believe, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe that God appreciates when you get angry at him. I mean, nobody likes for somebody else to be angry at him, but I don't know if you realize, but the proof of your faith when you get mad at God is pretty incredible. You're kind of proving to yourself and to God that you believe in him enough that you get angry at him. Well, in this case, I wasn't angry. I prayed with faith. I prayed with hope, and I love him. And it was answered, just not in the time that I thought it should be. But as a result, all these other things were shown to me and occurred and made, and actually helped me and benefited me. And I just thought that was a spectacular lesson. in such a simple fashion, spontaneously, not expecting it. Was just out there talking to my mom and then going to cycle my generator engine, and poof, 30 minutes later, this huge lesson that I'm able to share with you pops out. Now, that has nothing to do with media, but it's an important thing. Several people wrote me the other day, one person in particular, and said, thank you for Friday's show, because what they learned, they said they felt as though the show was aimed at them, and it was about guarding yourself and your emotions from an addiction to stress and anxiety from 2020 and all the things that you've been through. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to that episode, go listen, because you'll understand how you can become chemically addicted in your brain to misery. And even when you think you don't want it, your body is craving that sorrow or that misery. That's why when you go through something tragic, I don't want to say that you need to rush and you have to get through mourning, for instance, as fast as possible, but you have to, when you find yourself getting bogged down in depression or misery, you have to get up and act, and you have to get yourself out of it. You have to. Otherwise, you will be addicted to it, addicted to the crying, addicted to the sorrow. And so this little lesson that I learned is one of the things that's important. You are going through a hard time, or you feel like that things are too hard and you feel like there's no hope. Remember, here's your hope. This sounds, you're going to say, this doesn't sound like hope to me, but here's the hope. We're all going to die. That's the hope. That's where your faith comes in. That's where the love of God comes in, because if you look at death as something that's terrible, but the reality is, as hard of a feat as that is, and of faith, of dying actually is, it's actually the time when you get to leave this miserable existence and be with God. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. So as you're going through all these things, remember that when you ask him, please, Lord, I can't take much more of this, or help me get through this, or I'm having a hard time with this. Remember, if you ask it in faith, if you ask it with love of him, God, yes, it's a him, a masculine, and you ask him to help you, expecting that his will is the best thing for you, and asking for that to be done, the right thing will occur, and it will occur in the right time. It may not be the time that you want. You may be at your wit's end, but trust me, you ask in faith, ask with love, and in hope that his will be done, and it will all work out. And in the end, when you die and when I die, we'll be able to celebrate in paradise and say, you know what? Now I get it. Now I get it. I proved this. I learned this. I showed that my faith was there. And that's what it's all about. Proving that you can be trained, trusted, and you won't quit. That's it. So I hope that helps you out a little bit. I hope that gives on a Monday, I hope that kind of motivates you a little bit and helps you see the reality of what life is all about. Now, let's transition a little bit, because one of the other things I want to say real quick is that I do this show, or I do, I work with different groups, and I speak for free for a lot of these different things that are going on around the country. And I've put a lot of time and effort going all over this country in support of freedom and right to life, and just God's will in general. And when I get into debates on Twitter, or sometimes I just do it just to poke fun at the liberals and the leftists and the communists. But quite often, to be honest with you, it's serious business. I know it's weird hearing a SEAL say that social media is serious business, but it is serious business. And I'll tell you why it's serious business, because it is where influence in this day and age, it's the biggest place where influence occurs, and misleading and misguiding information exists. Now, it works hand in hand, as I've talked about before, with the news media and with politicians and activists and gossip. But yet it's not always special interests. It's not always big money people. It's not always politicians. A lot of the times it's people that have egos or who are self-centered or are trying to gain fame in media. I've often said that as I used to sit there in media, in the green rooms at CNN or at Fox, and watch what was going on, I would get there early and leave there long time after my interviews so that I could make connections and meet people and learn. I would talk to the different people that work there and learn how these things worked. That's how I produce my own shows like this. And one of the biggest things that I've seen, or what I term media whores, they can't get enough of the energy of being in front of the camera or being on the radio, and that it makes them feel validated, makes them feel important. And quite often, some of the worst people doing this are people that are involved in good causes, and people that are, and sometimes I don't even think that they realize that they're actually doing this, because it can become addictive. It really can. Now, there are people out there that are just nasty human beings. And, it's interesting. I've learned this lesson over and over and over. And I'm not surprised when I see somebody murdered. It's not like I see that all the time, but in the career field that I've been, when you see somebody who's murdered, it's not surprising when I see somebody die before people say they shouldn't have died now. It wasn't their time. Well, it was their time. But that doesn't surprise me. What surprises me over and over again is the hatefulness of people, and how some of them will go out of their way to injure other people that never did anything to them, to injure people who are actually doing good and doing good for the right reasons. And I see this over and over again. I almost everywhere I've lived my entire life, I've been witness to this. And I think it's really one of the most disgusting things that human beings can do, is when, for ego's sake, they attempt to injure another person. And it's more blatant now than it's ever been. In fact, the numbers of people that are like that, I'm assuming there are more of them. I mean, they probably, if it wasn't for social media, they'd be bullying and terrorizing people in their workplace or somewhere else in church. I've seen it in church. I've seen it in people's jobs. I've seen it neighbors. I've seen you name it. I've seen it. And it's a horrible, horrible thing to see. However, what you must know about me is that and I want you to hear this from me, because I want you to be like this. When you stand for something, when you see that there's been an injustice and you decide, I'm going to take a stand, you're going to have enemies. You're going to have people who are the bad people who made these things happen. When you take a stand, you're going to have people that are from the other side taking their stand over there, whether it's upright or whether it's evil. They're going to be taking a stand against you. And the thing about social media is that they can try to injure you, and they can do things. And now it's not uncommon for people to call other people's work and try to get them fired. And what's crazy about that is that some of these companies and schools and things actually listen to these people. When it's almost, if things are so bad that somebody calls somebody else's work, if it was not murder or rape or somebody actually going out and screaming a racial slur while they beat somebody up, and that's almost never happens. That's almost never the reason why somebody calls somebody else's work. It's usually over something political or because their ego is hurt. And so the claims that they make are outlandish. Outlandish to the point where there's almost no chance that the people that they're complaining about would ever say or do what they're saying. So you have to realize when you are doing the right thing, when you are standing up for the right reasons, you will have enemies that are going to come after you. I mean, that comes with the nature. That's called warfare. It's what good people who take action are involved in. You are involved in warfare. And I'm here to tell you, folks, if you want to live a comfortable life and you don't want any disturbances and you don't want, to ruffle any feathers, then go buy yourself an island and move there. Because even in this day and age, when you're not doing anything to anybody, chances are someone will come along and piss on your parade. And in fact, they may do that simply because you live a pretty damn good life. And they'll hate you for it. But listen, if you're going to get involved in things and you're going to actually go out there and make a difference, then you better buck up and you better get ready for battle. Because the enemy is going to be there and they're most likely going to bring it. And when you add into that some of these egocentric, narcissistic, backstabbing, ego-tripping maniacs who should be on medication, when you add them into the mix, who have no other reason to say or do anything about you or your cause except for the fact it's not shining enough light on their ego, then you stand firm and you do what you have to do. And I will say this, when it comes to Governor Cuomo in New York, he is a murderer. He is a megalomaniac. He is more than a bully. He is a megalomaniac. He is somebody that's like a mixture of a psychopath and a narcissist, clinical psychopath and narcissist, who's gotten power. That's Cuomo. And the eye on the target is actually, you can actually see how many times over the past year have I come on this podcast or been on TV or been on the radio warning people about Cuomo, trying to get people to go to action and do something about this megalomaniac, murderer. It's what I stand for, is going against people like that. And when that occurs, and all these incredible people, mostly women, by the way, where are all the men in this country? Mostly women standing up to Cuomo. I haven't seen many men standing up to Cuomo. God bless these women for what they've done. And they've really brought a light to him and his injustices and his evil ways. But when you step forward to do the right thing and fight the good fight, these nasty people are going to come out of the woodwork. So you have to make the decision. And I've made my decision a long time ago. You either stick with the fight or you get out of it and you move on and let somebody else fight it. But if you're going to stay in it, then you better listen. That saying, everybody wants to be a warrior until it's time to go to war. You can either be a paintball person or an airsoft guy who's going to put on all the gear and spend $1,000 on airsoft guns and go to the airsoft field where, you can eventually shoot some 10-year-olds and conquer the field. That doesn't even come close to the reality of warfare. I've had people who play airsoft try to tell me how to shoot and move and communicate. I have news for you. In real warfare, you're getting, the possibility of you getting killed is huge. The fact that when you go through a door, you may have to actually kill another human being is huge. The fact that that person on the other side of the door may actually kill you. I've been in instances inside the United States when I was with the FBI going in to arrest somebody, and they have children in there. And I've been in cases where we've been briefed that, yes, they have a child, 13 years old. Well, they didn't tell us that the 13-year-old was 6 foot tall. And when we come up the stairs and he's standing there in his underwear and we got a gun pointed at him, had I made the wrong decision, I would have killed that child. But because of training and experience and understanding, that's how serious this is. And when you go to battle, when you go to war, that's how serious you take it. And if people get in your way, you do what you have to do to keep your eye on the target until the target is taken down. And in this case, it's Cuomo and him going to jail and out of office, not necessarily in that order. And if people want to get in my way, or they're going to get in the way of other people that are doing God's work, well, I'm going to do the exact same thing I would have done in any other circumstances as a warrior. I'm going to charge forward, and I'm in the case of social media, I'm going to charge forward, and I'm going to point it out, and I'm not going to feel bad about it. So anybody that wants to come at me or come at any of these other people that are doing the right thing because their ego is hurt and they think that I'm a bad, horrible person, well, I'm sorry, but it doesn't affect me. And I'm going to be honest with you, folks. Some of the worst people, offenders of this ego trip that I've seen are people who have lost loved ones, whether it be Gold Star families or whether it be what's going on now with all these incredible people who have lost their lives because of Cuomo. Listen, I'm not saying anything that many, many people have not experienced, but I'm going to point it out so that it's aired, that when somebody has been through a tragedy, it does not give them a license to go around bullying other people so that they can be noticed. And when it gets to the critical time when justice is about to prevail, if you get in my way, or if you get in the way of justice and I have anything to do about it, you will no longer be, you will get out of my way, or you're going to get steamrolled. And if it hurts your feelings or it hurts your ego, listen, sorry, but I'm not sorry. Don't play the game. Don't get in the fight, and don't get in my way if I'm out for justice. And I can't say it any more plainly than that. Don't go out and call yourself a victim and then turn around and bully other people. Because there'll be people like me, it may not be me, it may be somebody else, that is in the fight for the right reason, and you're going to get steamrolled. That's what's going to happen. For the right reason. So enough said on that. Enough said on that. I'm not apologizing for anything that I've said or done on social media. And if you're the recipient of the steamroll, then most likely, I would say 100%, you got a little bit too far in your ego and you started doing and saying things that are going to prevent the right thing from occurring. And it's better that you get on board and get in the fight or get way away from it, because this is serious business. People have died because of bad decisions by Cuomo. And I'm not just talking about one or two. Even that would be bad. We're talking about thousands of people. Thousands. By that ego maniac, megalomaniac, narcissistic psychopath who goes on television and berates the people who've lost loved ones. It's sick. Now, all of this is leading somewhere. All this stuff that I've gone over. And the title of this episode is how, I got to pull it back up here. It's how the media spin works, okay? This is how the media spin works. Everything that I just talked about right there, not the first part of this show, but that part about ego trips and special interests. And you know, listen, I'll say the same thing about people who, like Cuomo's staff, who comes out there and tries to berate people. I'll say the same thing about them. On social media, they're going to get steamrolled. Now, it's not always successful when I go after somebody on social media, but I'm not going to hold back, and I'm not going to doctor it because it made somebody feel bad. But here's the reality of what people do. They will go out and they get a publicist, or a lot of the times they have a publicist or they have a way into media, and they will come up with a narrative, and then they will say that narrative over and over and over again. They will take any interview that they can and repeat that narrative over and over. They repeat the narrative again and again, interview after interview, network after network, TV, radio. They repeat this. Print, they repeat it. Online, publications, they'll repeat it. And you know what happens? The media starts to actually use the same narrative. They start to use that narrative that these people spun up, whether it be because they are against the other people or whether they're just doing it for ego reasons. And here's the scary part of this, that lie or that misguided truth can then find its way into the courtroom, just like it did with Comey, and how Comey and the FBI used the dossier, the fake media that they knew was fake. They knew it was fake. They took part in having it created. And then they used that to get a FISA, and the way that they got the FISA was by leaking parts of the dossier to the media. The media repeated it over and over again. Then they took that to the FISA court and said, this is being reported that this is occurring, and they're the ones who created the info. And the FISA judge, who's just as crooked as the rest of them, then gave the FISA, which is like a Title III on the criminal side, but it's basically gives you the right to surveil an American citizen, in this case on the FISA court. They approved it. And see, this is how, intentionally or not, spinning in the media can influence way down the road. And a lot of people who think that they're doing it for ego or they're trying to get recognition, and they hire a publicist and they go out and they do these things, eventually what happens is it finds its way into the media's narrative. And then what happens? It ends up affecting what the right thing, what should have happened, and it can actually cause it a detriment. It can cause things to go wrong and for justice not to prevail. Now, this occurred today, and this is a perfect example of two brothers whose family, their father died in the homes because of Cuomo. And these two guys, for whatever reason, I'm not going to go into why, or I don't agree with their narrative. I don't agree with it all. But they continuously go in on media and say the same narrative. And they're saying basically that they don't believe what Cuomo did is criminal. I don't know how they came up with that narrative. They say that that they would like to meet with Cuomo and get an apology so everybody can move on. And they've repeated this narrative over and over and over, whether it's in the mornings on Fox News, whether it's on some other network or in print. I saw it in the Post, the same narrative over and over and over. Now, are they doing this intentionally? I don't know. I would hope that they're just misguided. But if they think that something great is going to come out of this, they're wrong. There's no great plan. Things don't work like that in a court of law, where you can go and trick people into coming and apologizing so that you can say, I got you. That's only in Scooby-Doo. It doesn't happen in real life. This is what happens in real life. I turn on Fox today. They weren't on. The two brothers weren't on, but who was on was Charles Hurt, and he was on with Arthel Neville. And this is what Arthel Neville, who used to be my neighbor, and who is a very nice and pleasant person, at least with me, but is also a far leftist, as is apparent in this interview. Now, usually when you interview somebody, you ask them a question, they give you an answer, you ask a follow-up question, but not with Arthel. She's going to go down the road of giving her opinion about the reality of what Cuomo did, which just happens to be the same narrative as the two brothers who keep going on the news and spinning this narrative. This is what she had to say.
And I get all of your points there, Charlie. A couple things, though. First of all, you talk about it was at the beginning of the pandemic. And certainly, let me be clear, making no excuses for no one. There is no excuse for, listen, people lost their loved ones, and I would be fit to be tied had I been in that situation. So I understand how these relatives are feeling. That said, it was the beginning of this pandemic. And, a lot of people didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what the directives were. Sure. So there was that. And I will say that, to your point, you said that you felt like the governor was cooking the books. Listen, at that same time, again, no blame here, just laying out the case here. At that same time, though, kind of to your point, though, that was also when former President Trump wasn't really revealing what was really happening, quite frankly, either. Also, in terms of calling him the love gov, like I was one of the people who watched his daily briefings, and there were a lot of things that he did right. Again, that doesn't excuse what is happening now. But just to be fair, we want to put that out there. Now, meanwhile, of course, Sure. The FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn, they're investigating how the Cuomo administration handled the New York nursing home scandal there. And again, no room for politicizing deaths of elderly patients. But my question to you, Charlie, should Cuomo critics consider pressing hard for answers without appearing to be out for political blood, thus giving the governor an opportunity to call this a partisan persecution? Yeah.
Now, do you see her narrative now is the same as the two brothers who were going out and repeatedly saying this. Now, on the liberal side of Fox, they're actually using that narrative, saying that should the people, she's talking about the victims. She's talking about the people whose family members have died. She's actually asking the question, shouldn't they just give Governor Cuomo a chance to answer this and not be out for political blood? Because, Trump didn't give the truth either. So why should the governor be held criminally liable for not giving the truth? That's basically what she's saying, which is the same thing that these two guys are saying. So this is how spin works. I know because I've seen it. I've actually participated in it for the right reasons and I'm not going to go into that here, but because I knew something, I knew the truth about something. So I literally took any interview I could get in this particular subject. This was several years ago. And I took every interview I could get, every radio interview. I did BBC. I did New Zealand radio. I did Sky News, Canadian television. I think I even did Chinese television. I did every major outlet talking about this particular thing. I was on fire back then. It was like 2014, 2015. And basically all I had to do was say, I think this, and they would air it. Whoever I asked, they saw that I was one of the guys that was on Fox or CNN all the time. They aired it. And you know what happened? They started repeating my narrative, which was the truth, which was the most significant truth of this one particular issue. I'll probably tell the full story eventually, but what I learned from that, and I didn't, here, what's interesting is that I had seen this occur when I first got into media, but I'd never taken part in it, and I wouldn't take part in it to lie or to do anything like that. I knew the truth, and so I took that truth, that narrative of the truth, right, and I just kept repeating it. anywhere I could. I didn't have a publicist. I just learned. I see these things. So I figured it out. And so I repeated it everywhere I could. And then the media started to repeat it. And before long, the narrative that was the lie started to disappear. And the narrative that I had created started to be reported over and over again, where the anchors were asking questions of other guests based on what I had said, which was the truth, versus what they had said before. Now, this can work both ways. You can go on and tell a lie, and that can be repeated. If you repeat it over and over again, as Arthel Neville just showed, that as well can be repeated. So it can go both ways. You can save the truth or you can injure the truth. That is how a spin works. So when you see these people on social media that you think Scott Pressler is the most amazing person, he picks up trash in the inner city. Well, Scott Pressler, who I've met, is an egomaniac who thinks that he's done amazing things for this nation. Now, you may think Scott Pressler is all that, and I'm just using the guy as an example. He's one of 100 out there. And he's a good example of somebody who is not spinning a narrative to injure people. He's spinning a narrative for Scott Pressler. And people buy off on it, and they think that he is actually doing way more than he is. There's people out there that are actually making a big difference. Now, I told Scott Pressler to his face when I met him, I said, what you've done is great. What you do with it will determine whether or not you're remembered as somebody who made a difference. And that was 3 years ago. And quite frankly, that's not long after that where he went downhill and basically just started spinning his own narrative to make himself sound like he is phenomenal. So this can work in many, many different ways, but that is how grifters and social media, quote unquote, influencers use the spin. And that is how narcissists will use the spin. They will injure what good people are doing so that they can get attention. They will, through tragedy, get a voice. And then all of a sudden, they start, wherever they can get a microphone, they start analyzing anything. You may have a parent whose son died in the military in some, special forces or whatever. The parent has never been involved in the military except for the fact that they birthed a child that went out and gave their life. Other than that, they've done nothing. And a year and a half later, after they appeared on Fox or one of the other networks because to speak about this horrible death, all of a sudden they're out there analyzing tactics in Iraq or the healthcare system. Not because they know anything, but because they pumped themselves up so far that's what they became, riding the coattails of their son or daughter's death. And I see this over and over and over again. So there's spin that you can do for an actual cause or against a cause. There's spin that you can do for ego and for self-promotion. And I'll give, Scott Pressler and some of these other grifters, I'll give them this compliment. They can self-promote like no one I've ever seen before. The new social media influencer is really not an influencer. They're a promoter. They are the ultimate self-promoters. That's what they are. So one thing that I want you to understand when you watch the television or listening to the radio or when you go on social media, when somebody appears, and I've said this over and over, whether it's a politician or somebody who's been through tragedy, whether it is somebody that, you've seen them over and over again for years and years, and they just must know what they're talking about. You should pause and you should ask yourself, why is that person telling me that this is the way it is? Or why is that person analyzing this situation? Do they have an expertise, or is there an ulterior motive? Are they spinning the truth? I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is the experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and I'm out of here.